Dear colleagues, let's continue our real option valuation. Can you here? Can you see the presentation? Yes, all good. We can start. Yeah. Can we start? Yes, good. Let's continue. We start on the classification of our option, and we propose to series of our options, such as abandonment option and option to defer developing. And as I said earlier, there are different kinds of our options. There are different groups of our options, and another group is presented by option to expand or to contract. Certainly, it's a classical American call option when we are receiving the opportunity to increase our market power, first of all, our marketplace, as we can name this category. The option to expand the scale of the project is a formally equivalent to American call option on the stock. And if we are proposing the definition of this option, management may choose to build capacity in excess of the expected level of output so that it can manufacture at a higher rate if the product is more successful than was anticipated. And certainly the expansion option gives management the right but not the obligation to change the power of the project and to start production of additional products. And the second kind, our option to extend or shorten, it's a variant of put option when we modify, first of all, the power of our project, and when we increase the opportunities of our project, for example, in case of negative scenario of negative financial results. And it's possible to shorten the life of an asset or a contract, and to extend as a call, option to shorten as a put. But in this context, option to shorten the project is a very classical example of our options, as you can notice. And option to scope up or scope down. Scope is the number of activities covered in a project. And it's in terms of our real option valuation, it means, first of all, the ways, the channels of our project and changes in production capacity of our project. Our scope is like diversification, and it means we are receiving the opportunity to increase or to decrease the diversification of our project. It's sometimes preferable to be able, at a high excise cost, to choose among a wide range of alternatives and buying the option to have greater scope with a call option. And three last kinds of our options, such as switching option, when we have the opportunities to change the list of our products and between our external conditions and market expectations and our production cycle. In this context, it means in one moment of time we produce one product, in another moment of time we produce the second project, for example, according to the market expectations, first of all. And the wide diversified options, or I can name this option as difficult build options, such as compound options and rainbow options. Compound options mean option on option. When we have, for example, portfolio of different flexibilities of different opportunities for our company, and in other words, we have the choice between different options. And phased investments are a good example. You may have a factory that can be built in a second of real option. Each contingent of next option is the option on the previous stage. In other words, it means that there are portfolio of options when, for example, you receive a good result on a pre-investment period, you can start the investment period. If you have a good result on investment period and an investment stage of your project, you'll receive the benefits in liquidation step of the project. So why it means the option step by step, in other words. And rainbow option is a kind of our compound option, and according to this option, we have the following opportunity. We have, first of all, multiple sources of uncertainty produce a rainbow option, and first of all, the scientific step will be continued by the production step, will be continued by production stage in our investment project. And most research and developing programs have at least two sources of uncertainty: technological and product market uncertainty. And so why good results on the first period, on the first step, will continue a good result to the next stage, to the next period. But as I said earlier, as I promised you earlier, certainly depends on the company, and perhaps you increase this classification by your own variants of investment projects. Certainly, we can't finish this list only using this 10 classification of real option. And now, as we detailed the classification of our real option, as we analyzed the classification of our real option, we formed the definition of our real option. And now let's think about the models. How could we evaluate, how could we estimate the value of this flexibility? How could we find the value of our flexibility? There are two main models of finding the value of our real options. Certainly, all these models are based on our financial options, first of all, and as you can notice in our real option valuation, we'll use well-known models of our financial options, first of all, and the first model is Black-Scholes model, or sometimes Black-Scholes model. Name of this model. According to this model, on which aspects should we pay our attention? To tell the truth, our Black-Scholes model is a very defined model. On the one hand, there are a defined range of parameters to be used in this model, and there are no modifications in this model. Only knowing the construction of this model, you have to put the meanings. So you have to determine the meanings of all parameters, for example, and certainly it gives you the opportunity to find the value of our option. And as about the second model to be used in our real option valuation, sometimes we can use a graphical model such as our, first of all, event tree, and secondly, our decision tree. Based on our event tree, we'll build our decision tree. But it's a graphical interpretation of our model, of our real option evaluation. Let's start on our Black-Scholes model. Let's define the main conditions of our Black-Scholes model, first of all. And then let's transform this model for our real option valuation. As you can notice, our Black-Scholes model was created, first of all, for our financial option. And then the parameters of Black-Scholes model from financial options were transformed for our real options. As about our Black-Scholes model, as the main exceptions of our Black-Scholes model, the model makes certain exceptions, including, first of all, the first exceptions and the first conditions of this model. The options are open and can only be exercised at expiration date. In other words, the date of expiration is determined earlier in a previous step. The classical Black-Scholes model was created to call option, but certainly changing the parts of this formula, we can find the value of our put option. But the classical Black-Scholes model was created for call option. No dividends are paid out during the life of the option. And the third condition, efficient market. Market movements can't be predicted. In this case, we won't pay no commissions in this case. And in other words, there are no opportunism in this model. There are no consequences of opportunistic behavior in this model. There is no surplus agency expenditures connected with receiving the information, with adopting the information for future operations. The risk rate and volatility of our asset are known and they are fixed, they are constant, and follows log normal distribution. In other words, the yield or the prices of our assets have these parameters have normal distribution, and they are normally distributed, in other words. And as about the construction of our Black-Scholes model, you can find the construction on this graph. Our Black-Scholes model proposes us the information of finding our premium for option in our financial option, or finding the value of our project in our real option valuation. As about a classical model, let's start on our classical Black-Scholes model, and then we'll transform this model for our conditions. Our call premium equals our current stock price, or our spot price of share, multiply the coefficient, which you can find in special financial table. It's the meaning of the probability of normal distribution of parameter D, the first, or the parameter D1. Our parameter D, the first D1, can be founded as normal log normal, ln our current price divided by our strike price, normal logarithm, our strike price divided and our spot price divided by the parameter, plus our risk-free rate, it's our R, risk-free rate, plus our current stock price we are using in this model. And in this context, S, the high level of S, it's our current stock price, and S to the extent 2, it's our standard deviation, or standard deviation to the extent 2 of the parameter, divided by 2, and multiply T time until option exercise. And all this statement, the standard deviation, multiply our period of expiration, our option to the extent 0.5. And in other words, it will be our current price multiply our cumulative standard normal distribution of parameter D1, ln multiply, or ln based on the parameter, our current stock price divided by our option striking price or strike price, plus risk rate, plus our standard deviation to the extent 2 divided by 2, and multiply the period of existence of our option, time until option exercise. And all this statement is divided by standard deviation, multiply on our T, our period of expiration, to the extent 0.5, minus the same cumulative standard normal distribution by based on our D the second. Our D the second can be received as our D1 minus standard deviation multiply T to the extent 0.5. All this statement we should multiply on our strike price and multiply our exponential term, our exponent to the extent minus risk rate multiply on time until option exercise. And this formula is a very stable formula, is a very strong formula, as you can notice. As about our D the first and D the second, they can be presented as parameters, as coefficients, as you can our coefficients, and the meaning of our normal cumulative standard normal distribution on D the first and D the second you can find in a special financial table, the table of normal distribution. To tell the truth, in practice, we are not so interested in our D the first and D the second. We are more interested in the results of our normal distribution. According to the rules, our cumulative standard normal distribution based on D the first demonstrates us the probability that the market conditions are not so good to realize the deal in the market. Or in other words, our market conditions create us all opportunities to realize the option. In other words, based on our, for example, let's return to the graph, based to our call option, the market price will be higher comparing with our strike price, or our market does not create the conditions of external realizing the deal. In other words, our market conditions create us the opportunity to realize an option. And as about N based on D2, based on our D2, normal or cumulative standard normal distribution of D1 proposes us the information about the possibility of expiration of the option. Demonstrates us the possibility, the possible opportunities, the expectations of realizing the option. The first component, market conditions, will lead to realize the option, and the second component, our option will be realized. It's our possibility to realize the option. And as about the main parameters, determinants of option value, variables relating to underlying asset, our variance in the value, variance increases, both call and put options will become more valuable because all options have limited downside and depend upon price volatility for upside. Expected dividends on the asset, which are likely to reduce the price appreciation components of the asset, reducing the value of calls and increasing the value of puts. And certainly all these conditions will be quite similar for our financial and real options, but for our real options, these components can be transformed not far from the life, from the nature of our real option. Now, as I demonstrated this slide earlier, our normal distribution of the parameter, cumulative standard normal distribution of D1 and D2. Let's sum up our ND based on D1 proposes the possibility of creating the external conditions for expiration, for realizing our option, and our cumulative standard normal distribution based on our D2 proposes the information of realizing the option. And now let's transform all these parameters for our real. First of all, let's start on the formula for our option, and then we return for the conditions. To tell the truth, in our real option valuation, this formula will be transformed to the conditions of our investment project. In other words, our call premium will be transformed for our net present value of the project using our real options. And in other words, our financial result of the project using different flexibility. As about our current stock price, it will be the return to discounting meaning of our cash interflows. In other words, our current financial result of the project. As about our option striking price, or our K in this case, our option striking price will be transformed for our capital expenditures in real option valuation. In other words, it will be our obligations for in payments or for paying to realize this investment project. And as about our R, risk-free rate, the same for our real option. As about time until option exercise, it'll be the time of possessing, the license of possessing the patents. And let's return our option values determined by 6 variables. To tell the truth, all the parameters which will be used in our future calculations are presented on this graph. Time to expire, our time to expiration of the project, uncertainty, volatility about the present value. It means, for example, changes in our benefits for investment project, our investment cost, as I said earlier, this category means our strike price for option, and risk rate the same as alternative. On the one hand, as the alternative deposit, alternative investments. On the other hand, it's the measure of risk in the market, and in this model valuation of our real option, we have to add cash flows lost to competitions who have fully committed. In other words, it means our losses as the response for changes and for changing the parameters, the moment of starting our investment project. And our formula will be presented in the following way. It will be, let's compare two main formulas, as about current stock price. It will be our current current inflows, current benefits of the project, multiply our E or our constant E exponential term to the extent minus YT, where our Y means our losses after delay, after changes, the parameters of investment project. Or sometimes our Y can be named as losses in our dividend payments, losses in our dividends, on our share results. Our constant t to the extent minus YT multiply normal distribution of D1. D1 can be founded as natural logarithm of cash inflows to cash outflows, the same as our current stock price to our strike price. In this situation, our future price, plus risk-free rate multiply T, the period of existence of this option, and plus the new component, such as our losses of delay, plus our standard deviation or dispersion in this context, to the extent 2, or dispersion divided by 2, multiply T, period of using this option, and all of this divided standard deviation multiply our T to the extent 0.5. And D1, second can be found as D1 minus our standard deviation multiply our T, period of expiration of the option, to the extent 0.5. And it will be this formula. Our cash inflows multiply our constant T to the extent minus YT, multiply normal distribution of D1 minus our, let's return, our strike price, our strike price, our cash outflows in the context of real option, multiply our E to the extent minus risk rate, multiply on T, and all of this multiply N based on D the second. As about our Y, let's refresh this formula. As about our Y, as about our losses, it will be natural logarithm multiply 1 plus 1 divided by t. 1 plus 1 divided by t, where t is the period of possessing the asset. Certainly, later I'll return for this formula and I'll propose the total definition, the total solution of this task based on this formula. But first of all, let's read together the task and then let's find the solution of this task in our future research. Stocks mine reliably estimated at 1 million ounces of production capacity, 50,000 ounces per year. It's expected that the gold prices are rising annually by 3%. In other words, our prices and our sales will be changed to 3% each year. The company owns the rights to the mine for 20 years. In other words, 50,000 ounces per year, and the period of existence of this option is 20 years. The total reserves of our company are 1 million ounces of production capacity. The cost for the opening of the mine and the start of production, development cost, equal to $10 million. Average production costs amount to about $250 per ounce. Expected increase in operating cost of 5% a year. The standard deviation, our standard deviation of the price of gold is 20%. It's assumed that the instability of the price will not be changed. Current price of gold is $375 per ounce. Our risk-free rate is 9%. And certainly we have to make a conclusion about this project, and we have to calculate net present value of this project. First of all, I have two questions. The first question is the following: what difficulties could we meet in this task? What difficulties could you determine in this task? The first question. And the second question, what's about real option? Could we find a real option in this task? Could you determine a real option in this task? Could you determine a real option in this task? You can use the chat or you can use your microphone. What difficulties could we define in this task? Or perhaps no difficulties in this task. All's good without any difficulties in this task. And to the second question, where is real option? Or perhaps this task ignores real option. And we'll find a classical net present value in this task. How do you think? The first question, what are the main difficulties of this task? And the second question, where is our real option in this task? You can write in chat. How do you think? What is the real option in this task? Or perhaps there are no real options in this task. What we shall start with. It's difficult to understand, too much information. Good. And as great problem of this, thanks a lot for your answers. As a great problem of this task, I think a growth. A growth as it's expected that gold prices are rising annually by 3%, the first difficult moment in this festival. The second difficult moment, to tell the truth, adding standard deviation of the price of gold, 20%. Yeah. To tell the truth, it's certainly difficult, as you can notice. And where is the real option in this task? Could you find a real option in this task? Could you find a real option in this task? Or we have no options in this task? How do you think? Dear colleagues, how do you think? Where is the real option in this task? Or we have to find a classical net present value. Just a second. It's with gold. Maria, thanks a lot. Perhaps, thanks a lot for your answers. Perhaps I'll highlight the statement with our real option. The company owns the right to the mine for 20 years. And own the right, or owning the right, it's a classical example of our real option. In other words, for us it means, first of all, our company in this case has the opportunity to start the project or to change the point of starting this project. Let's return for this taxonomy of option, or classification of our option. Our company possesses the option to expand or to contract in this context. And in other words, for example, to differ development. During 20 years, our company has the opportunity to start the project. Perhaps it will be into 5 years, perhaps it will be into 10 years, and so on. In other words, our company has the opportunity to choose a correct period of starting the project. Our company possesses the license, and so why our company has the opportunity of realizing this option in every moment of time. And so why? Certainly, if we are analyzing a real option in this context, it's expected that our company possesses the right to the mine for 20 years. And this opportunity will value in the context of our task. Let's start the solution. We analyzed earlier the model of our real option valuation, and now let's transform this model to figures. First of all, to tell the truth, as our girls proposed, there are a great part of information, such as it's expected that gold prices are rising annually by 3%. Expected increase in operating cost of 5% per year, and so on. And in this context, it means, first of all, let's start off finding the main parameters. The first parameter, it will be our share losses or losses in our stock yield, in our dividend yield. If we, for example, if we change the period of starting our investment project, certainly in this context, means, first of all, we are changing the period of starting our project, and we are changing, in this context, first of all, our possible benefits on the investment project. The period of existence of this project is 20 years. So why our Y, it will be normal logarithm on 1 plus 1 divided by the period of existence. It will be 0.05, our Y as the component. As about our cash inflows, on the one hand, our production cost. Let's start on this one. Our current price of gold is $375 per ounce, and we can expect that gold prices are rising annually by 3%. So why I'm proposing you the following formula of finding our cash inflows. It will be 50,000, our capacity, multiply 375, it's your sales for 1 year. And now we should add the component of changes of the price in the following way. It's a stable formula of corporate finance. Multiply 1 minus 1 plus our growth to the extent 20, divided 1 plus our risk-free rate, 9%, 1 plus 9% to the extent 20. And divided our cost of capital minus our growth. In other words, our cash inflows, 50,000, multiply 375, multiply 1 minus 1 plus 3% to the extent 20, divided 1 plus 9% to the extent 20, divided cost of capital minus our growth. And our cash inflows in this context, it will be 211,000.97. In other words, certainly all these meanings are presented in million rubles and $1 million. In $1 million, why it will be thousands and thousands. As about our cash outflows, the same, we are using the stable growth model in this context. And it will be 50,000 multiplied $250 as our production for 1 year, multiply 1 minus 1 plus 5% to the extent 20, divided 1 plus 9%, our risk rate to the extent 20, and all these components we have to divide 9% minus 5%. And don't forget to add our 10 millions based on our previous contexts. In other words, we are transforming this formula to the stable growth model with a growth of 5% or growth of 3%. As about our cash outflows, this parameter means 174.55. And certainly, perhaps you didn't know the formulas with a stable growth, but in this slide you can find them. Solution. How could we behave in situation of stable growth? It will be your annual sales multiply 1 minus 1 plus growth to the extent of duration of the investment project, divided 1 plus 9%, 1 plus risk rate, the same to the extent the duration of investment project, and divided cost of capital minus growth, this well-known component of our stable growth model. Then I found it D1. It will be normal logarithm based on our cash inflows to cash outflows. Or in this context, it will be our spot price divided by our strike price. Plus our risk rate multiply T. Let's return for this. Risk rate multiply the period of existence plus our losses in yield. Don't forget about our losses in yield. And plus our standard deviation or dispersion. Standard deviation of the price is 20%. So why? It will be a standard deviation to the extent 2. Multiply the period of existence of this option divided by 2 and multiply our certainly T is the component. And all of this divided our standard deviation multiply T to the extent 0.5. We are using this formula, our standard deviation multiply by standard deviation, multiply period of existence and divided by 2. Standard deviation to the extent 2, multiply 20 years as our T, our period, and divided by 2. As about our D the second, it will be D the first minus our standard deviation multiply period of time to the extent 0.5. And so why in this context it will be two meanings of our standard deviation of our normal distribution of all parameters. As about normal distribution based on D the first, the meaning, certainly I'll return for them, table of our normal distribution. Normal distribution 2.73, the meaning of our normal distribution of 2.73. 2.73, this one, 0.9965 or 70. But the probability that the market creates all conditions to realize this license, to realize this real option, this probability is 99%. And as about the second, we have received 1.83, normal distribution of 1.83. Let's return for our table, 96%. The probability our company will realize the option, will use this license for future production, for future capacity, this probability is 96%. Perhaps different risks, perhaps different expectations, perhaps opportunism will lead to reject of using this license in 4% of all cases. So while the possibility of good conditions 99%, the possibility of realizing the option 96%. And as the last step, I added all components in our formula. First of all, our cash inflows, our benefits, 111.79, multiply our constant E multiply our constant t to the extent our yield losses multiply on t, our yield losses, which were calculated earlier, to the extent t, our period of expiration, multiply normal distribution of D1, 99%, minus our strike price, or our capital expenditures, multiply constant t to the extent risk rate multiply period of expiration, and multiply our probability of realizing this option, or 96%. And we are receiving 49.82. 49.82. In other words, the project in which our company also possesses the right, not the obligation, but the right to this mine, the value of this option is 49.82. And in the case of the lack of this option, if our company starts the project and will receive the following benefits, net present value of this project will become 37.24. Good. If you use the microphone, perhaps you have any questions. Dear colleagues, have you any questions? I can hear the microphone, and so I decided that you have any questions. It's certainly a surprise, but all microphones switched down. But good. If you have no questions, let's continue. Certainly, it's a classical task. It's a classical task of using our Black-Scholes model. And you can determine the modification of our Black-Scholes model. In this context, you can notice the changes of all our parameters to Black-Scholes model, certainly. But the formula comparing with the first scenario only was added by losses in our dividends, by our Y component. Y component to the extent for our constant E, and our Y as the added component for our D1. Good. In other words, certainly for our company is a good opportunity possessing this license, possessing this pattern to start our company's valuation in this context. And in the context of our real option, the value of the project is 49.82, and as about net present value in the context of the lack of our option or the absence of our option, net present value equals 37.24. Good. And now let's start another model of option valuation, our decision tree and our event tree. Certainly, it's another modification of our company's valuation. It's another modification of proposing our options of the company, opportunities of our company, changes for our company. It's a graphic interpretation of events which can take place for our company. And first of all, as the graph interpretation of real option, first of all, we'll construct our event tree, and then based on our event tree, we'll construct our decision tree. I think during our lecture, we'll analyze in details our event tree, and secondly, we'll start on our seminar decision tree. What does it mean, event tree? As we said earlier, our real options mean, first of all, our reaction to uncertainty. Certainly, we can calculate our investment project in very stable conditions and predetermined conditions, as you can notice. But on the other context, we can add different probabilities in our project, and under this uncertainty, under this probability, we'll receive another results for our investment project. First of all, let's start on the following type of task. Suppose we are starting a project that has a present value of $100. Present value of benefits, or present value of cash inflows of the project is $100. Volatility of 15% per year. In other words, in a stable, predictable scenario, our present value of cash inflows is 100. But if we are transforming from our ideal conditions for our real conditions, present value of our benefits can vary of 50%. Expected rate of return is 12% per year. The risk-free rate is 8% per year, and cash outflow necessary to undertake the project, if we invest immediately, is $105. In other words, our capital expenditures, the meaning of our capital expenditures is 105. In our perfect market, we can expect $100 of benefits, but if we transform to conditions of uncertainty and risks, our volatility of 15% will be added for our present value of cash inflows. Expected rate of return or cost of capital for our company is 12% per year, and risk-free rate is 8%. If you analyze your cash inflows and your cash outflows, certainly in this context we have to reject our investment project. We have to reduce our investment project. First of all, as our cash inflows, the meaning is low compared with our cash outflows. But let's add the component of volatility in our scenario, in our project. First of all, in our stable scenario, in our predictable scenario, our cash inflows, the meaning is $100. But we have to add the variety, we have to add our volatility, the component of our volatility of 15%. And we can suppose that our expected cash inflows will be increased to 15% or can be decreased to 15%. Certainly, we'll use geometric decision and geometric distribution, geometric changes in our cash inflows, and in all cases we won't receive negative meaning of our cash inflows. In the context of using volatility, first of all, we have to calculate our up movement coefficient and our down movement coefficient. It's a new material, I think, in my mind. It's a new material of adding our component of volatility in all these cases. What does it mean for us? First of all, our volatility in all these cases. We can calculate our up movement coefficient and our down movement coefficient. As about our up movement coefficient can be found in the following way. It will be our constant E to the extent standard deviation multiply our T to the extent 0.5. What does it mean, our T? Our T means the period of time of expected changes of our project. In other words, our project can be changeable annually, or each year our cash inflows can be increased or can be decreased. The duration of our project, let's suppose the duration of our project is 5 years. And certainly we are starting on predictable scenario of 100. But each year or every year, our cash inflows can be changed to 15%. In this context, we can find our up movement coefficient in the following way. It will be our constant E to the extent standard deviation multiply our T, our 1. Our constant T to the extent 0.15 multiply 1. And our up movement coefficient, it will be 1.16. In other words, we can add or we can replicate our 1.16 to our expected cash inflows, and we'll receive our changes in the first year and the second, and so on. As about our down movement coefficient can be calculated in the following way as 1 divided by up movement coefficient, or 1 divided 1.1618. And our down movement coefficient, the meaning of our down movement coefficient is 0.86. And now we are up movement coefficient and down movement coefficient for our results. It will be 100 in a stable scenario multiply 1.16. Or if our expectations, the following of decreasing or to minimize this parameter, it will be 100 multiply 0.86 as we calculated earlier. Then, if in the first year our cash inflows will continue the growth, it will be 116 multiply 1.16. And in other words, it will be 1.135. If after the first year we'll receive the downward, we'll receive the decreasing of our parameters, it will be 116 multiply 0.86. And it will be the same meaning as the increasing of our bad scenario, increasing of our 86. And for the period of time of 5 years, you'll add the parameter of growth. You'll multiply, for example, 116 multiply 1.1618. You'll receive 135. Or you'll multiply 0.86 and you'll receive 100. The same situation with our 86 multiply 1.16 or 86 multiply 0.86. And after this combinations, after this changes, if each year our cash inflows will be changed to 15%, will be changed by under the pressure of our standard deviation, by the end of the fifth period, we can expect that our cash inflows will become the highest or the maximum level 212, and the minimum level, the lowest level, it will be 47. In other words, on the first step, you'll add up movement, down movement coefficient, you'll add the coefficient of growth and the coefficient of decreasing, and you'll construct this tree. Or in other words, this tree is named as the event tree. Under the pressure of uncertainty, under the pressure of deviation, of standard deviation. And according to the rules, we have to check a defined cells of this tree. Certainly, it's not necessary to check all parameters, all points in this event tree, but 2 or 3 points, 2 or 3 cells can be checked. Let's demonstrate the models of checking our scenarios, of checking our branches of our tree. There are 2 methods. The first method using our risk rate, and the second method using our risk-free rate. If we use our risk rate, first of all, we have to calculate the probability. We have to calculate the probability of good scenario or of the bad scenario or of the negative scenario. And let's check the following. First of all, up movement, down movement coefficient, we calculated earlier. Our up movement coefficient is 1.16. Our down movement coefficient is 0.86. All's good. Now, as about our options, let's check. As about the probability of a good scenario, as about the probability of up movement, this probability can be calculated as constant t to the extent cost of capital minus our down movement coefficient and divided up movement coefficient minus down movement coefficient. In other words, it will be our constant t to the extent 12% minus our down movement coefficient minus 86, and all of this divided up movement minus down movement coefficient. The probability of good scenario, the probability of increasing our parameters is 86%. And the probability of decreasing in our scenario, it will be 1 minus the probability of growth, 1 minus 86%. In other words, the probability of decreasing our parameters is 13.88%. And now I am checking them first, but follow the first group. In other words, the returning for the 4th period of time, our expected cash inflows in the 5th period of time, multiply on the probability of the growth plus the negative scenario, will receive 182. In other words, discounting meaning of our bad and good scenario using the parameter of probability will give us 182. Let's check. In the first step, we calculated the probability of the growth. And the probability of growth is 0.86. the probability of decreasing the probability of default is 13.88. It's very good. But now we are returning our future results to the fourth period of time using a classical discount scheme based on our WACC, based on our cost of capital of 12%, and based on our probability. Let's calculate. It will be the probability of growth, 86%, multiply the maximum level, 212, plus the probability of default, the probability of decreasing this parameter, 13.88%, multiply 157. That's our law, meaning of the parameter. And all of this divided 1 plus 12%. And our present value in this context, it will be 182. The same we can check, for example, the group of 135 to 157, 116. In other words, it will be 157 multiply the probability of increasing, multiply 86%, plus 116 multiply the probability of decreasing, multiply 13.88, and divided 1 plus 12%. We'll receive 135. And all these sums can be calculated in the same way. Or perhaps if you prefer a risk-free rate, in our risk-free rate, we'll use the same mechanism. First of all, to find our probability of increasing and probability of decreasing, and then adding this probability or putting down this probability in our formula. As about our possibility or probability of growth, you can use the following statement. It will be 1 plus risk rate, 1 plus 8%, minus our down movement coefficient, minus 0.86, and divided up movement coefficient minus down movement coefficient, and divided 1.16 minus 0.86. As about probability of increasing using our risk rate, the same, but the mechanism of discount will include our risk rate in this context, and the probability of increasing in this context, it will be 72%. The same, the probability of decreasing, it will be 0.17%, 0.17 or 17% in reality. And the same, we can check all these parameters as our probability of growth multiply on our high level, 212, plus our 17% multiply on our low level, 157, and as the discount mechanism, we'll use our risk rate of 8% and divided 1 plus 8%. And we'll receive the same 182. Or perhaps based on our next pair, it will be 157 multiply 72% of the probability plus 116 multiply 17% probability of bad scenario, and divided the same 1 plus 8%, and you'll receive the next, meaning 135 and 35. Good. in seminar will continue. I think it's not necessary to start the topic without finishing this topic. We'll transform our event tree to our decision tree. And according to the rules, according to the main parameters of our decision tree, we'll add our flexibility using our uncertainty of external conditions. In this case, in construction of our event tree, we added the parameter of our, first of all, the parameter of uncertainty. And now we have to add the parameter of flexibility of the company. Let's suppose certainly our external conditions will influence the company. But our company, for example, let's open the first task, our company can, for example, increase payouts of 20% by spending an additional $15. In other words, certainly it's an option to expand, to increase, to develop the business. In other words, our company will pay $15 and will receive 20% growth of benefits, 20% growth of net income in this scenario. And so why certainly it's a decision tree, we'll construct decision tree, and it's the decision under uncertainty using the flexibility in business. In our seminar on investment analysis, we'll finish the topic of our real option, we'll construct our first of all decision tree in this context, and then we'll try to find the solution. We'll refresh in our memory the main models of finding the solutions for our investment project. If you have any questions, you can ask me. If you have no questions, that's all for today. Good. Yes, in our chat. Just a second. Good, dear colleagues. Have any questions on this topic, on this material? To tell the truth, it's a difficult topic. I can agree it's a difficult topic, but it's an obligatory topic in our company's valuation and in our investment analysis. Have any questions? All is good. Good, dear colleagues. If you have no questions, if you have any questions, we can stop on this decision tree, event tree, and see you on seminars. Goodbye.